So, greetings from APK Kerala. Let us begin our journey through the history of pharmacy profession in India. Before we dive into the story, let's look at our learning objectives for today. By the end of this session, you will be able to understand the evolution of pharmacy profession in India, explain the major milestones in pharmacy education, and so on and so on. So, why study pharmacy in India? You might ask. Why do we need to study history? Why study to understand exactly how pharmacy developed from simple traditional knowledge into a highly modern profession? See, studying history is very much important because knowing the past will let us know how to play in the present and the future. So, regarding pharmacy profession, we need to appreciate the massive contribution of ancient Indian systems of medicine. It's also important to understand that the deep colonial rule had on modern pharmacy practice. By looking at our past, we can study the growth of Indian pharmaceutical industry, and ultimately we want to understand the long journey from simple compounders and dispensers to the registered pharmacists and clinical pharmacists. So, traditional healers and early pharmaceutical practice. In ancient and traditional practice, there was absolutely no clear separation between a physician and a pharmacist. The traditional healer, known as Vaidya, often performed multiple roles all by himself. He was responsible for the diagnosis of the disease. He was responsible for the selection of the medicine, the actual preparation of the formulation, dispensing it directly to the patient. Everything was done by the Vaidya himself. This practice was highly localized and completely experience-based. During this time, pharmacy existed as a functional activity, but it was not separate professional identity. The concept of a distinct, separate pharmacist emerged much later. It is heavily influenced by the Western medicine and formal education. So, arrival of Europeans and Western medicine in India. The story took a dramatic turn in 1498. We know that Vasco da Gama reached Calicut. It led to an increased European contact with India. Soon after, Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French all came and established trading settlements. The English East India Company was famously founded in 1600s. As colonial rule spread, it introduced Western medicine into India. Western medicine gradually became institutionalized through the creation of military hospitals, civil dispensaries, medical stores, medical colleges, all backed by government-supported healthcare systems. Eventually, the British system of medicine became the officially supported healthcare system of the land. But there was a major flaw for us pharmacists. Pharmacy education did not develop at the same pace as medical education. And the growth of British medical system in India. As the British expanded their presence, the Indian medical service played a major role in spreading Western medicine far and wide. Medical personnel served both military and civil populations. Hospitals and dispensaries were established in many parts of British India. Medical education rapidly developed through proper medical colleges and medical schools. By the time we were nearing independence, India had medical colleges successfully producing medical graduates. So, medical education received systematic and careful attention from colonial administration. So, who was actually giving out the medicines during colonial era? The pharmaceutical services were mainly provided by a mix of groups: apothecaries, hospital assistants, chemists and druggists, compounders, and dispensers. The apothecaries mainly served European troops. hospitals, medical deposits, medical shops, etc. The hospital assistants served as the native troops in civil hospitals. There was also a civil apothecary class that operated mainly in the Madras presidency. Eventually, these fragmented professional categories were abolished. The biggest problem during this time was absolutely no standardized national system of pharmacy education was existed. So then the chemist and druggist course, it was considered as a small ray of hope. During 1870, chemist and druggist course was started at the Madras Medical College. Much later in 1937, a similar course was started in Visakhapatnam Medical College. This training model was carefully modeled on the Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain. Actually, it can be considered as one of the earliest organized pharmacy training program in India. It was intended to finally produce qualified professionals for pharmacy practice. But sadly, the course attracted only a limited number of students. The reason is that there was a total lack of statutory recognition for the pharmacy profession. So, a very less number of students joined the chemist and druggist course, Pharmaceutical Society of India. Despite the lack of jobs, a spirit of professionalism was waking up. During the early 20th century, Pharmaceutical Society of India was established in Madras by qualified chemists and druggists. I told you in the previous slide that in 1937, the course was flourishing, not flourishing, initiating. So, the Pharmaceutical Society was established by some qualified chemists and druggists in Madras. They passionately worked to improve the quality of pharmacy practice in country. To keep the standards high, the membership was strictly restricted to qualified chemists and druggists. And to the any qualified pharmacy course is there, only those people are admitted in the Pharmaceutical Society of India. Unfortunately, the activities was only confined to the Madras presidency, Madrasi region, Provincialeke matram. And the society was eventually dissolved in 1949. At that time of dissolution, only 56 members were present in Pharmaceutical Society of India. So that shows there were how few were the qualified drugs and chemists at that time. Now the compounder era. Since the educated chemists were so few, the largest group actually involved in dispensing medicines were compounders. These were low-level practitioners of pharmacy. Formal training of compounders had started in Bengal in 1881, and the training programs later developed in Madras. However, there was no uniform national education standards. The entry qualifications of the duration of training, entry qualification, the duration, everything varied from place to place. The standards in Bengal was not in Madras. The standards of Bengal was not the similar as that of Madras. Because of this, compounders faced a tough life. They received very poor salaries. They had a low professional recognition. They had very limited training. They had very minimum social prestige. There's a thing that Vellore CMC, they also had a compounder training program in 1930s. So by the time of India's independence, the country had approximately 27,000 compounders doing this work with very limited recognition. So coming to the independence, we'll see the status of pharmacy before independence. If you look at the big picture, just before independence, the status of pharmacy was frightening. Pharmacy practice remained poorly developed. Only very few number of professionally qualified pharmacists existed in the whole country. Dispensing was largely performed by inadequately trained compounders. Government support for pharmacy education was minimal. The pharmaceutical manpower development was completely neglected. The situation was exposed when the Health Survey and the Development Committee reported India had 47,500 doctors but only 75 qualified pharmacists. This meant that pharmacist to population ratio was approximately one pharmacist for every 4 million people. That means the existence doesn't matter. That was the truth that time. This demonstrated a truly severe shortage of qualified pharmacists. So, uh, pharmacy education in Portuguese Goa. It was interesting. Things were much better in a different part of the country. Pharmacy in Portuguese controlled Goa was better developed. In fact, the first pharmacy college in Asia was in Goa. But at that time, it was not under British India, it was under Portugal. Pharmacy in Portuguese controlled Goa was better developed. Doctors arriving from Portugal were actually accompanied by trained pharmacists. A medical school was established in Goa in 1846, and a school of pharmacy functioned proudly with that institution. They offered a proper 3-year diploma in pharmacy. The admission required a completion of secondary school education. Educational standards in Goa were comparatively higher. The Goan system beautifully demonstrated the importance of integrating pharmacy directly with the healthcare development. So, Goa was far ahead and the emergence of European pharmacies. While Goa was flourishing in British India, a new kind of medical shop appeared during 19th century. European pharmacy establishments. They mainly served British military personnel, British government officials, European families, and wealthy Indian customers. They were fancy pharmacies, expensive. They developed in big areas like Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, and cool hill stations. The sad reality was the ordinary Indians generally could not afford the medicines which are sold at these European pharmacies. So that shops were very expensive. These European pharmacies were also quite unique because they expanded far beyond just dispensing medicines. They were massive business enterprises. They sell aerated water. They sold surgical instruments, photographic equipments, hospital furniture, luxury toilet products. They even sold wine and liquors. They some operated printing presses. These were all European chemists or European pharmacies in the 19th century, which emerged for rich people or elite class. Because of this wide variety, these establishments were successful in the rich class of people. We already mentioned about European chemists and European pharmacists, but this this was only established in larger towns like Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi for the rich, for the British officials and rich Indians. But outside of these rich European stores, general Indian drug trade was a mess. No comprehensive drug law existed. No pharmacy practice legislation existed. Because of this, almost anyone could simply open a drug shop. There was no professional qualifications needed. This led to terrible problems. This led to terrible problems that the widespread sale of substandard medicines and adulterated drugs happened. There were deep malpractices in drug import, highly unregulated drug distribution, and a severe shortage of qualified pharmaceutical personnel to fix it. So when people started getting hurt by the bad medicines, public concern and professional criticism gradually increased. Then doctors cannot look after all of these things. They have other things to do. People are getting hurt by bad medicine. So then the people realize the need for a reform in pharmacy education or pharmacists, the need of pharmacists. So in 1930, because there were no proper laws, the public grew worried about the safety of medicines. Government had to take action. In 1930, the government of India appointed Drugs Enquiry Committee. This is very important committee and was chaired by Sir Ramnath Chopra. Sir Ramnath Chopra As a pharmacologist, we have to say a lot. We already plan to start some legendary series on these people like Ramnath Chopra. We will surely go for that. And coming to the Drugs Inquiry Committee, Ramnath Chopra was given a huge task to carefully investigate the problems related to drug quality, drug import, drug manufacture, pharmacy practice, and pharmaceutical education. After studying all of this, the Ramnath Chopra committee recommended some comprehensive pharmaceutical reforms. This report, this, this Drug Inquiry Committee report was a massive wake-up call, and it became one of the major turning point in the Indian pharmaceutical history. So, the committee did something very important. It did not simply describe the problem. It provided a blueprint for the future of Indian pharmacy. The committee recommended central legislation for controlling drugs. Remember, at that time, India did not have a comprehensive law controlling the manufacture, import, distribution, and sale of medicines. The committee also recommended legislation to regulate pharmacy practice. It suggested the establishment of an advisory board consisting of experts. It recommended the creation of a central drug testing laboratory. It emphasized the need of an Indian pharmacopoeia. And they asked the government to consider whether to make a combined Drugs and Pharmacy Act or a separate Drugs Act and Pharmacy Act. Many things they have recommended. So, if you look around today, many of our pharmacy institutions is because of these recommendations. Today we have drug legislation. Today we have pharmacy council. Today we have drug testing laboratories. Today we have Indian pharmacopoeia. Today we have organized pharmacy education. Many of these institutions and systems we take for granted today can trace their intellectual origins to the recommendations of this committee. So, they did not merely write a report. It created a roadmap for the future of Indian pharmacy, and that's where the importance of Sir Ramnath Chopra. And coming to the Drugs Act of 1940, drug legislation was delayed despite the committee recommendation, because having recommendations is one thing, converting the recommendations into law is another, and that took time. Several years passed. In 1937, an import of drugs bill was introduced, but there was a major problem. It dealt only with the imported medicines. What about the medicines manufactured in India? What about their distribution? What about their sale? So that proposed legislation was incomplete and the bill was withdrawn. Finally, in February 1940, a comprehensive drug bill was introduced. It covered 4 important areas, that is import, manufacture, distribution and sale. Import, manufacture, distribution and sale. This bill was passed and received assent of the Governor General in November 1940, and that is Drugs Act of 1940. This was an historic achievement. For the first time, India had a comprehensive central legislation for controlling medicine. And here, students should remember one simple principle. The Drugs Act regulates the drug. Later we see another act, the Pharmacy Act. The Pharmacy Act regulates the profession. Don't confuse. The Drugs Act regulates the drug. The Pharmacy Act regulates the pharmacy profession. If you remember this difference, you will never confuse the two acts. But development of drug regulatory institutions. A law written in book cannot test a medicine. A law cannot enter a factory. A law cannot inspect a manufacturing unit. A law cannot analyze a drug sample. For legislation to become effective, we need institutions. We need experts. We need laboratories. We need enforcement mechanisms. This is what should happen next, and that exactly happened. The Drugs Technical Advisory Board, the DTAB, was constituted in 1941. The first meeting was held in 1942. Then came the drugs rule of 1945. Another important development was the Central Drugs Laboratory. The Biochemical Standardization Laboratory has been established in Calcutta in 1937. 47, the Biochemical Standardization Laboratory was converted into Central Drugs Laboratory. Together, these steps we have created a successful institutional framework for drug testing, quality control, and regulatory enforcement. After independence, the effective drug control system became fully operational. India finally became an independent nation. But what kind of pharmacy system did we inherit? The reality was quite poor. The country inherited poor pharmacy practice, severely limited pharmaceutical education, very rudimentary pharmaceutical industry. There were also a severe shortage of qualified pharmacists. Our newly independent nation had to build everything from the ground up. We focused on four major areas of developing or creating new drug legislation, pharmacy regulation, and pharmacopoeia standards, as we said earlier. We also heavily pushed before better pharmaceutical education also. Uh, the main question we faced was, should we continue depending on other countries for our medicines, or our technology and our pharmaceutical knowledge? Should we depend on other countries, or should we build our own system? And India chose to build. That decision transformed our profession. The post-independence period already told drug registration is there, pharmacopoeia standards, pharmaceutical education industry. The next several decades would completely was going to transform Indian pharmacy. So we were talking about Indian independence. Before that, I talked about Drugs Act, and that time I mentioned another act, Pharmacy Act. Drugs Act was about the drugs, but the Pharmacy Act is about our profession. Just 1 year after independence came this historic milestone, Pharmacy Act of 1948. Remember the difference I mentioned earlier. The Drugs Act regulates medicine, Pharmacy Act regulates pharmacy education, profession of pharmacy. The Pharmacy Act provided for the establishment of Pharmacy Council of India, or PCA. The first meeting of PCA was held in May 1949. Then the state pharmacy councils were also established. The pharmacist registration became a statutory responsibility. Only registered pharmacists can practice pharmacy. Minimum standards of pharmacy education could now be developed just because we have established a pharmacy council. The first president of Pharmacy Council of India is from Kerala. His name is Sree K. Raja. Okay, now coming back. After Pharmacy Council's establishment, a pharmacist was no longer simply someone standing behind the counter and handing over medicines. The profession now had legislation. The profession now have education standards. The profession now have registration. The profession now have state councils and statutory recognition. The Pharmacy Act has governed the profession for decades, while the current proposals for a new regulatory framework show that professional regulation continues to evolve. In 2023, National Pharmacy Commission bill was put forward, and now in 2026, a second draft is there. Let's hope for the best. The lesson is important that a profession is never permanently finished. It must continue to change with the society, science, and healthcare. So, the development of pharmacy education regulation then happened. Once the Pharmacy Council of India was established, another question appeared. What should a pharmacist study? How long should the course be? What subjects should be taught? What practical training should be provided? Should every institution follow its own system? Obviously, that would create confusion. So the PCA introduced the first education regulation in 1953. First education regulation was introduced in 1953. These regulations defined minimum educational requirements for becoming pharmacists. This was extremely important. For the first time, India had a national framework for pharmacist education. These regulations were revised as the profession developed. Changes came in 1972 and in 1991. The Education Regulation of 1991 introduced the familiar 10 plus 2 plus 2 pattern for diploma in pharmacy education. But the pharmacy education did not stop there. Degree education expanded, postgraduate education expanded, PharmD programs came, research programs evolved, new specializations were emerged, and pharmacy education evolved continuously because of the role of pharmacist himself was changing. So now Indian Pharmacopoeia and National Formulae. Now imagine that you are manufacturing a tablet. How much active ingredient should it contain? How pure should the drug be? How should its identity be confirmed? What test should be performed? Who decides these standards? This is where pharmacopoeia becomes important. A pharmacopoeia is an official book of drug standards. Before independence, India largely depended on British pharmacopoeia. But an independent country needs its own standards. So the Indian Pharmacopoeia Committee was constituted in 1948. After several years of scientific work, the first pharmacopoeia was published in 1955. This was a major achievement in India's pharmaceutical independence, where we were no longer simply depending on foreign standards. So then in 1960, the first national formulary was published. Later, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission was established in 2004 at Ghaziabad. Today, total Indian Pharmacopoeia represents India's scientific authority in drug quality standards. So the independence was not only political, it was also scientific and it was also pharmaceutical. So, beginning of the degree, pharmacy education. Now we come to one of the favorite parts of this story. We already see that many laws were formed. Laws can regulate profession. Industries can create employment. But ultimately, education can create professionals. The development of degree level pharmacy education in India closely connects with Banaras Hindu University and Professor Mahadevilal Shroff. He believed pharmacy should become a university level scientific discipline, and in 1932, pharmacy subjects were introduced in BSc courses in BHU. In 1934, a BSc Pharmaceutical Chemistry program was introduced. In 1936, a postgraduate diploma in pharmaceutics was introduced. And in the same time of 1936 or something, Dr. P.N. Menon started a PG diploma course in Maharajas, Ernakulam Maharajas. That's the first organized pharmaceutical education started in Kerala. That's in Ernakulam Maharajas. In July 1937, BHU started the first regular B.Pharm program in India. Think about what this meant. For the first time, a student could enter a university and study pharmacy as an independent scientific discipline. They can study pharmaceutical chemistry, suitics, cognosy, drug analysis, manufacturing, everything. So, this is how the scientific foundation of the modern Indian pharmacist was created, and that is why Professor Mahadevilal Shroff is remembered as the father of modern pharmacy education in India. So, but the beginning was very small. At the independence, only 2 institutions offered B.Pharm degrees. The combined annual intake was approximately 30 students in an entire country. And by 1957, India had only 8 degree level pharmacy institutions. Growth was very slow. But gradually, something remarkable happened. The pharmaceutical industry expanded, drug regulation expanded, research institutions developed, the demand for trained pharmaceutical professionals also increased. More colleges were created, By 1995, India had 62 granting institutions with an annual intake of approximately 2,700 students. But by 2026, Kerala alone have 68 colleges or 70 colleges. So that's why I'm going to tell that after 1995, the expansion was very much faster. Many diploma programs were started, many B-Farm, many M-Farm, new specializations, new universities. Every larger education system begins with a small classroom and few people who believes in its future, and that's what now pharmacy profession is. Now coming to M-Farm, NIPER and PharmD. As a pharmacy education expanded, another question emerged. Is undergraduate education enough? A scientific profession needs specialists. Scientific profession need researchers, they need teachers, they need drug discovery scientists, they need clinical experts, they need industry leaders. That kind of requirement needs postgraduate and advanced education. M-Pharm education started at BHU in 1940, but later different specializations were developed. Pharmaceutics, pharmaceutical chemistry, pharmacology, pharmacognosy, industrial pharmacy, then quality assurance, pharmacy practice, biotechnology. Now medical devices are coming, and some other M-Pharm is also coming. Are also coming. Another milestone was the establishment of National Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research (NIPER) at Mohali. NIPER represented India's ambition to create advanced pharmaceutical education and research at the national level. Later, additional NIPERs were created, and later in the academic year 2008-2009, a new program was introduced, PharmD. So, traditional pharmacy education in India had been strongly oriented towards industry and products. PharmD was introduced to strengthen the clinical and patient care dimensions of the profession. Pharmacist was increasingly being seen not only as an expert in medicines but also as a professional involved in optimizing medication therapy and improving patient outcomes. So let's look at some major pharmaceutical legislative and policy measures, milestones. At first, it may appear only to be a collection of dates, 1930, 1931, 32, 33, 34. But just look at that. I already mentioned the Drugs Inquiry Committee, Chopra Committee, Drugs Act, Drugs Rules, Pharmacy Act, First Education Regulation. So these are the major legislative policy milestones. These milestones should show how law, education, drug quality, and industry and professional practice develop together. So the evolution of pharmacy practice. Now we must ask an important question. Did all this progress in education and legislation immediately transform pharmacy practice? The answer is no. Professional practice changes slowly. At independence, hospital and community pharmacy services were poorly developed. The earlier pharmacist was mainly product-centered. They procure medicine, they store the medicine, they compound the medicine, they dispense the medicine. The focus was mainly on the product. But then medicines become more powerful. Drug therapy became more complex. Patients started using multiple medicines. Adverse drug reactions become an important concern. Medication errors become an important concern. So giving the correct medicine is not enough. We must also ensure that the medicine is used correctly. So in 1970, clinical pharmacy began receiving increasing attention. The pharmacist's role gradually expanded towards drug information, patient counseling, medication safety, pharmacovigilance, pharmaceutical care, etc., etc., etc. The transformation is still continuing. So now we will see the growth of Indian pharmaceutical industry. At the independence, pharmaceutical production capacity was around 10 crore. India heavily depended on foreign companies. Many medicines were imported. Technological capacity was very limited, but India wanted pharmaceutical self-reliance. Public sector companies, indigenous manufacturers, research institutions, they all tried their best. Then came a major turning point, that is Indian Patents Act, 1970. India adopted a process patent system for pharmaceuticals. This was the major turning point. This created opportunity for Indian scientists and companies to develop alternative manufacturing process for medicines. This made India self-sustainable in pharmaceutical for pharmacy, pharmaceutical industry. They learned to manufacture quality medicines at much lower cost. Between 1971 and 1990, India developed an increasingly self-reliant pharmaceutical industry. After economic liberalization in 1991, Indian companies expanded globally. India became a major producer and exporter of generic medicines. Indian pharmaceutical companies entered international markets. Many manufacturing factories obtained global regulatory approvals. And in 2005, the product patent regime returned, and Indian industry had to change. The challenge was no longer simply can we manufacture this medicine? The new question was can we innovate new medicines? Can we discover new medicines? Can we create biosimilars? Can we lead pharmaceutical research? The transition from import dependence to self-reliance, from self-reliance to global manufacturing, and from manufacturing to innovation is an extraordinary story. Today, India is known as pharmacy of the world. So, the laws did not write themselves. Professions do not develop automatically. Behind every transformation, there are people. Sir Ramnath Chopra gave leadership to pharmacology, indigenous drug research and pharmaceutical regulation. Yudhish Chandra Ghosh contributed to pharmaceutical education. Manohar Lal Khurana strengthened pharmacy education. Vishnupada Mukherjee, Bhupendra Vallabhai Patel, Korak Prasad Srivastava, and Mahadev Lal Shroff gave pharmacy education a university level identity. We should remember these names not simply for examinations. We should remember them because we are working inside the institutions and systems that these people help to build. We are living inside their legacy. Ancient pharmaceutical knowledge, European contact, Goa pharmacy education, Madras training, drugs inquiry committee, NIPER, PharmD, and finally, this is not a collection of events. This is one continuous story of transformation. So the transformation of Indian pharmacy, the evolution pathway, traditional knowledge, occupation, education. This is the story of Indian pharmacy. We started with traditional healers preparing medicines for individual patients. We passed through a period when pharmacy was performed only by compounders and assistants. Then came education, then came legislation, then professional recognition, then industrial development, then professional organizations and research institutions. The history of Indian pharmacy is not finished. The pioneers, which I told earlier, they fought for education, they fought for legislation, they fought for professional recognition. Their vision built industries, their vision created institutions. So, you know your history. We should respect the pioneers who built this profession, understanding the responsibility that comes with being a pharmacist. Remember that medicines may be the subject of pharmacy, but service to the society is the purpose of pharmacy. And before we wind up, we will see the presidents of Pharmacy Council of India from beginning to So that's all for now. Thank you. Thank you once again.